What's up, Chris?
Yeah, so I do have a question. It just came to me. I'm so glad I checked Facebook and I was able to see that you were live.
Cool.
And so my question is, I'm an INTP, and I was wondering some of the things that I could maybe put into practice, some of the things I could do to make the jump from a grade 6, like the pluralistic stage, into the integral stage.
Ooh.
Like the tier 2 stages.
Okay. Sure. So your question then, just to make sure I understand it, is actually a question about the system that we here have referenced called either the Graves model or spiral dynamics, which basically charts different levels of the type of worldview that someone would take in over their lifetime. And as they go up this model, this kind of descriptive model of how they're experiencing the world, they take in more territory in the worldview. And we can look at that either on a macro level or a micro level. I'm just getting everybody else caught up in case they're not familiar with that system. And so what you're talking about is being a Graves 6 green level in the Graves model or spiral dynamics. And your question's around, okay, what do I do when I'm at that level? How do I move beyond that? What am I supposed to play in? Am I interpreting your question or your thoughts correctly, or is there any calibration you'd like to give on that? Or you'd like to give on that?
Yeah, so that's completely accurate. I'm fine with what you said.
Okay.
It sounds good.
Cool.
So I have like a little, immediately like 3 or 4 questions came up. And by the way, I'm not sure how close you are to your receiver. I'm not sure if it's on my side, but I'm having just a little bit of trouble hearing you. So if you could get your mouth as close to your receiver as possible, that would, as I ask you these questions, that would be awesome. So my first question, thank you. My first question is, why on earth would you want to go to 7?
Well, it's because I like to keep developing. Like, I want to see how far I can go in my life, and I sort of hit the pluralistic stage, the grade 6, and which was great. And I found a community, and the first time I actually enjoyed communities. Mm-hmm. But now I'm seeing limitations with it, mm-hmm. and so I have this sort of feeling like I'm going to do something great, but not at this level. Like, I need to go to a higher level, a new stage, somewhere else to actually solve whatever problems or whatever I'm trying to do in my life, like whatever truth I'm trying to speak and kind of bring to the world.
Why do you have a sense that you're not going to be able to do what you want to do at this level? Where's that sense coming from?
So it feels like that in grade 6, I have a lot of thoughts about things like, actually, it's not even thoughts. It's more of, I have a lot of emotions around certain things, but there's no action there. Like, what action do I take? Like, how do I get into this specific topic or area that I have passion for, and how do I actually make change? And I feel like I'm kind of stuck, because it's like I can sit here and preach, you know, I'm just going to throw some very general terms out there, like don't destroy the rainforest, like in the Amazon, what's going on. But I can sit here and preach that, and I can boycott and do all this stuff, but that doesn't really get things done. Like, how do I feel like to actually think about it in a holistic way, I need to get to that 7 and where I can actually make an impact.
Okay. When do you believe that you entered 6 or green?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Oh, I'm sorry. When do you suspect that you entered grade 6 or spiral green?
Let's see. My first indication of it, well, not even that. Where I felt like, are you asking when I felt like I was fully into 6, or where I was entering into 6? I didn't catch if you had specified.
I didn't specify, but both. When do you believe that you entered it, and when do you believe that you were fully exploring?
Okay, so when I entered it, I believe that was around 2016. That's the closest I can come to it.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere, oh gosh, I was not expecting that question. Maybe 2015, 2016, somewhere in those years. And now I feel like I'm seeing, like I'm seeing the next level, but I'm not getting there, kind of thing. Like I'm seeing, like, we can use the colors like shades of like little scratches of yellow, little pinholes of yellow.
Okay.
Just like I was seeing pinholes of green when I was in the Graves 5 or the orange.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, or is that, was that off?
No. And do you mind if I ask how old you are?
I am 34.
Okay. All right. So here's my recommendations. There's just a couple of them, and then I'm going to put some caveats on them as well.
So we have more colors too.
Yeah, I know.
So
that's why I'm trying to try to go fast.
Just
Or not
managing.
fast, but I'm going to try to be aware of time, which is not something I'm usually good at. So the first thing I would do is I would make a map or a chart of when you believe you entered, explored, and exited every phase in your life. That's the first thing that I did, is as I tried to get a really good map of when I believe I explored each of the levels. The reason why is almost everybody has a preference for either odd or even numbers, and we have a tendency to stay a long time in either odd or even numbers and then try to blitz through the ones that we're not as comfortable with. So all the odd numbers are more me-centric and all the even numbers are more community-centric. And every single person has a tendency to sort of vibe with one of those depending upon other elements or components of their personality type. Like I'm an odd numbered person. And I think it's because, like, if I could try to diagnose it, but my suspicion is because in the Enneagram, I'm social blind. I'm also an NT. I'm also a perceiver. Like, there's a lot of reasons why I would probably have a strong preference for the odd numbers. So when I got to 6, I was in a really big hurry to get out of it and to get to 7 because I don't like the even numbers as much, right? Like, they don't feel as good on me. But what I realized that 6 is beautiful for, and one of the primary things that 6 gives us, because you're right, like 6 is kind of an impotent phase, quite honestly. Like you don't get much done at 6. Like you said, it's too pluralistic. It's too like live and let live. It's too everybody gets a voice. Like it's just, it's
Burning Man breaking down.
Yeah, it's Burning Man breaking down. Basically, that's what 6 is. So 6 is a tough one to get shit accomplished in. So I can appreciate, and especially if you're an INTP, you might be similar to me. You might have a strong preference for the odd numbers as opposed to the even numbers. So whenever you're in an even number space, you're going to want to blitz through it. The challenge is that what 6 does is it's the last level of the first tier. So it preps us for the next tier, right? It preps us for where we're going to next. And that means that we have to scoop up all the lessons of the first tier in order to have a good second tier experience, or at least that's what I'm suspecting. I don't know this to be true, but that's my suspicion. So what I did when I got to 6 is I was all like ready, because I just learned the Graves level or the Graves model or spiral dynamics at the end of my orange experience. I was at the end of my orange. I was hitting all the limitations of what orange could do for me. I mean, not financially. I had experienced orange. Stupidly, I experienced orange in a non-financial way, which is always the dumbest thing. But unfortunately, I did. And so when I got to 6, I was ready to get to 7, but I was not ready for 7. So I had a moment when I went, okay, I'm going to lean into 6 or green, and I'm going to let it happen organically, and I'm going to let 6 do everything it needs to do for me. And so what 6 does is it gives you time and space. And if you had a financially successful orange, which is recommended, it gives you enough financial space too to be able to do a bunch of personal development work. And that personal development work allows you to go back and look at all the lessons you didn't pick up from the previous levels. So make a map, chart it out, figure out where you entered and exited, and of course explored in the meantime, each of the levels, and ask yourself what lessons you got from it. And what were the lessons of that level that you missed? So it's very common for people in 6 to realize that they just didn't pick up the lesson of unconditional love at, say, 2, right? When they were in 2, their family was maybe, like had lots of fighting or anger management issues, or They never felt like they were part of a tribe or whatever. So a lot of people have to go do healing work in 2. Joel, when he got to 6, he had to go do 3 work. He had never had a rebellious teenage phase. He'd never had a warlord phase. And when you don't have a strong 3, you just kind of let people sort of run over the top of you. Some people have a really crappy 4 experience, especially these days, where religion and institutions are breaking down for people. And so they have a really bad 4, play well with others, my truth versus your truth experience. And then there's a ton of people now going to 6 very early, much earlier than any other time period in history. And they have a crap 5 experience. They never made peace with things like capitalism. They never made peace with making money and like gathering resource. So whatever it is that you didn't pick up in the first tier, 6 is your opportunity to do so. And sometimes we'll stay in 6 and churn there and not go to 7, not because we haven't fully explored 6, but because we didn't pick up those lessons from the earlier levels and they're needed for the 2nd tier. Is this all making sense?
Yes, it's making sense. And I'd like to make a comment before.
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I do have a comment. It's actually really validating that you made this the first point, because this is something that I have been working on for like a month. I was reading a book, and it just occurred to me to I was actually reading a book, and I came across a specific website, and I was like, oh, it occurred to me I can actually go, now that this model exists, like the Graves model, I can go back and look at it and do exactly what you were saying. And I do prefer the odd numbers.
Yeah.
You were correct in that. I do prefer the odd numbers, so I can. When I really got into green, I did feel myself, in hindsight, I was trying to rush through this stage.
Yeah.
But I luckily had a mentor who slowed me down, and he was like, you really need to focus on this, this, and this for you specifically. And so I took time off work. I went to Europe 3 times, and that's actually where I found my community, was in just outside of Stockholm, Sweden.
Oh, yeah.
And so I hung out there for a number of months, and it almost seemed like from like, for example, my sister made a comment while I was doing this. She was like, your life is like chaotic right now. And I was like, it doesn't feel chaotic to me. It feels really good, actually. I'm just doing all these different things.
Yeah.
Yep. But I just wanted to throw that in there.
Perfect. That sounds awesome. And congratulations for finding your tribe. That's so important at 6. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing. Did you create a map like I'm recommending? Did you just have a prescient sense to create that map, or have you not done that?
Yes, and I'm still working on it.
Okay.
So it's more of like in progress.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So figure out what you haven't picked up, make sure to pick those up, and then just keep working on those. Make sure that you've got everything you needed from 6 in order to get to 7. Now, my caveat is this. They were wrong when they said that 1 is the loneliest number. 7 is the loneliest number that you'll ever see. 7 is a really lonely place to be. And remember, the 2nd tier mirrors the 1st tier. So when you go to 7, like, everything feels warm and fuzzy at 6. 6 is like a nice warm blanket where you're like, it's going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay. We'll figure this out. When you get to 7 goes back to being a version of 1, right? It's 2nd tier that mirrors the 1st tier. So it goes back to a sense of survival. And all the warm, fuzzy feelings you had at 6 go away. And not only do they go away, but just like with every level that you bump up to, you start resisting the earlier level, right? Because you're trying to get some distance from it. You're going to resist the warm fuzzies of 6. It is a very isolating, cold, disconcerting place to be. So I don't recommend rushing there. It does feel like more like there's a lot more ability to sort of think in terms of how to solve problems. But I will say this, in some ways, we are outpacing our problems are outpacing our evolutionary development to solve them. And when you get to 7, that becomes incredibly clear. And so more people getting to 7 is a good thing, because you want more people in that level of systems thinking working together, right? So that we can get to 8 and all that stuff and like try to figure out how to solve some of these world problems. But in the meantime, it's a desert, all right? It's like a desert where nobody lives. So my recommendation is enjoy your 6 experience. Get as much out of it as you can. Really, really, really explore, really feel sort of galvanized in this place, get all the lessons you want. And then when you get to 7, God have mercy on your soul.
All right. Thanks for that.
There's a great resource, by the way, a guy I've been following. You might have heard of him. He's a Silicon Valley investor. His handle is @Naval, Naval on Twitter. And I can't remember his full name, quite honestly. I'm looking for it right now. Ravikant, thank you.
Ravikant.
I think his insights, like as I read them, I'm like, this feels like second tier 7 yellow thinking. The way he thinks, he did a podcast, I think, with Joe Rogan recently. One of the most fascinating, I mean, I've listened to it a couple times. It's a fascinating podcast. It's got some really interesting stuff. So that might be really helpful for you, Chris, as you're going through your journey, just to kind of get a sense of what's coming down the pike. That's kind of what I'm looking at, going, what's coming down the pike for me? What's ahead of me here?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just a thought.
Yeah.
So.
Was that at all helpful?
Okay, cool. Can you spell his name one more time?
Yeah, Naval, Naval, Ravikant, Ravikant.
She's got his last name. I would have never known how to spell that at all. But yeah, it's @Naval on Twitter, and I've been following him a lot. I love the stuff he posts. I think it's really, it's meta level stuff. It doesn't get down to the mire of all the, political or religious or social bullcrap. It just talks about things from a structural systems side. And I really appreciate that about him.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of thinking that I like. So thanks, Chris, for calling in, man. Hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.